All right, well, good evening. Sorry about that. Facebook got me there at the last minute. I was playing some background music, and the Facebook censors decided to pop up there real quick and grab me and stop the video. Interesting, I've used that music about 3 or 4 times now, and this is the first time where the Facebook censors came in and said you might be playing music in the background that you're not allowed to be playing. So good catch on Facebook. I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. Technology is one of those things you always have to be flexible about and always be prepared to react. So I am Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. This is Carbon Matters live streaming. I want to thank you so much for joining me on a Thursday evening, 3 August. Man, we're really moving through the summer. It seems pretty quick. Got a full packed episode this evening. I obviously want to run over the issues that matter to us most, about issues, concerns, things going on in county government and around our community. Then in the second half, what I'd like to do, I want to talk a little bit about my decision not to file my nomination papers to run to re-election, and that occurred, that non-action occurred Tuesday afternoon about 4:25, and I'll talk about the whole background and how that played out during the day, and of course give you some insight into, having done all that work, invested that time, money, and effort leading up to the day of filing, August 1st, why not following through? So that'll be in the second half. Also, I am going to start out front and center. I want to highlight that on the 28th of September is going to be joining me Sam Lux. He's a county controller candidate, a candidate for Carbon County Controller. Sam also is going to have a space down at the Carbon County Fair. So you'll have two great opportunities, plus all the other ones that Sam, I suspect, will be doing between now and Election Day, to get to know him, meet him, understand his background and experience and what he can bring to the table as the county controller. And the county controller, for all intent and purposes, is the de facto auditor of finances of the county. That's kind of the wave top, one over the world description of what he does. But again, I'll allow others to talk into more detail about that, and especially on the 28th, we'll allow Sam to talk about the duties and responsibilities of the controller, what his background is, his interest in actually running for the position of Carbon County Commissioner. So, Controller, what did I say, Commissioner? Thanks. Maggie's here editing me also, so I'm very fortunate to have her in the background there. All right. So what we want to do here is start rolling right away into our normal process, which is to review a lot of the things that are going on currently here in Carbon County or in the recent past. Remember, now I'm doing Carbon Matters about every 60 days. Sometimes it'll go a little bit longer. So, of course, some of these issues, and when they are issues, hopefully they've already been resolved. So we'll go ahead, we'll start with those. So we had the election, right? It was really not much excitement to it, with the exception of the sheriff's race. Really wasn't any competition at the county level. We had Ziegler versus Branch in the sheriff's race. Ziegler prevailed. Ziegler also prevailed and will be on both tickets. So he has no competition. The Democrats didn't run a candidate. But shortly after that, our three J's, Jen, Jane, and Jill, down at the election office. That's the first time that team of three, supported by Emily, Stacy, and a multitude of other staff, did a great job on Jen's first time running in an election. that gave us a level of comfort knowing that the contractor that we had, our former director, her services were no longer needed. So we made the decision after the results were certified, and we are comfortable after we kind of did our hot wash internally of how things ran, that it was no longer in the best interest of the county taxpayer and county government to continue to retain a consultant to help the new team in regards to the election process. So that went well, so that terminated that particular contract. You know, kind of on a, I thought, a disheartening note, we saw just a short time ago near the very end of May, right before Memorial Day weekend, that Asa Packer Mansion, what a jewel that is here in Carbon County, in Jim Thorpe, right behind the Annex building, that it's closed due to some issues that caused the guides to close, to no longer participate or want to be employed as guides. And they were actually working under the management of the Lions, although the borough of Jim Thorpe owns it. So there are some internal frictions with the running and the management of the mansion that caused, you know, the guides to walk out and basically quit. Fortunately, what did happen is the Lions retained management control, really a new generation of Lions. They were able to get some new guides and actually bring back some of the old guides who decided they wanted to come back. And the mansion is operating. And I gotta say, if you've never, as a Carbon County resident, been to the Asa Packer Mansion, you truly, truly need to go ahead and take the opportunity to go in there. I did not first go in there until returning back to the area in about 2014, and I literally lived, you know, 6 houses up the street. Now, I did have sisters who had worked there growing up in high school, but I never took a tour until after returning. And it was a great tour, very interesting, very informative. The guides were extremely professional. So if you haven't been there, I highly suggest you take the opportunity to go into the Asa Packer Mansion. And I'll tell you what, for what you pay, it's almost nothing. It's dollars. I'm still shocked how affordable that tour is. So again, I appreciate the Lions, the borough working together to keep those costs down. So literally thousands of individuals can visit the Asa Packer Mansion annually. That number is actually about 15,000 annual guests to the Asa Packer Mansion. If you're just joining me, I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. This is Carbon Matters live streaming. It's my opportunity to bring all of us up to date on some of the issues, the challenges, things happening primarily at the county level and beyond. I did see Carbon County departments are on the move. So a couple things that had occurred there, as you may recall, during the renovation of 44 Susquehanna Street and 76, we had moved some offices up to 410 Center Avenue in Jim Thorpe, the old school district, Jim Thorpe School District building. We still had planning and development was still up there. Recently, we were able to bring, about the end of June, bring planning and development, that's Dave Bonder and his team, from 410 back into, and if you check my top 10 priority list on my dry erase board 2020 for 2023, bring them back to their originally designated space in 44. Now, Rocky and I did have our one colleague who, for some crazy reason, wanted to put them elsewhere other than the space that was specifically designed for the Planning and Development Office. So we have Planning and Development have moved back into the space that was built custom for them and their mission. Then we had Children and Youth who moved down to 525 on Iron Street, as we did the unfortunate and asinine thing of further dispersing county government, more costs with that, travel time issues. Great building, great for children and youth, but not great for the county, not great for the county taxpayers. Once you start dispersing your offices around the county, you start accumulating maintenance costs, security costs, cleaning costs, multitude of costs where you're losing efficiency because the offices aren't in close proximity. Sending the IT guys down, sending the maintenance guys down, all right? But they're on the move. I did see, and this was, I believe, this article, Carbon Lawmaker says senior tax relief not enough. And this was Doyle talking about additional property tax rebate of 50% of their property bill up to $1,000 per homeowner. So it's interesting that Doyle is working at the state level trying to get a higher rebate. As you may recall, my two colleagues, they opposed a Carbon County senior tax rebate that was proposed on 6 January 2020 by Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz to assess the viability of a STAR program, senior tax rebate. That was for senior citizens once they hit 66 years of age, if they qualified 10 years of property tax paying in Carbon County. 66 years old, met a certain income requirement. Each year on their birthday, they would go ahead and receive, based upon their birthday, they would go ahead and receive a $250,000 reduction in their county taxes. Wayne and Rocky voted against even assessing the viability of that. Ran the math plenty of times, it's actually viable. So as you go into the polls here in November, consider that. But I'm glad Doyle's trying to do something with the tax rebate at the state level, but we should be taking care of our own people at the county level and the municipal level and the school district level when it comes to property taxes. And it's unfortunate the bind that we put them in. You know, I have colleagues who would prefer to see senior citizens in the food line at the food pantry versus in the line in the bank turning in a rebate check right into their checking or savings account. Oh, right, we knew that 84% of the population voted in favor of a bonds or bonds up to $10 million to preserve open space, right? Water, land, farmland. That board has convened in its inaugural session just a couple weeks ago. They're getting organized. They're going to be working on their bylaws, and they did have a good set of draft bylaws, and those will soon be coming to the Board of Commissioners for consideration. And once we have those bylaws established, then they can start the work of establishing criteria and a process and a procedure for evaluating properties to be brought into this program. Fred Kemmer from Franklin Township, who is a supervisor, was elected and is the chair for the Open Space Advisory Board. So our hope is in the very near future, those criteria will be developed and they'll start looking for properties that would be suitable for protection in Carbon County using those funds. Oh, Carbon says parking profits up 13%. Interesting, Senator Argyle at his tourism summit a couple nights ago at Mont Chunk Opera House also mentioned that this particular comment. So when I assessed the dollar figure, I saw both the dollar figure went up by about 13%. I think it went to $54,000 more or less was the amount that it went up in dollars. And that was from 1 January to if I recall correctly, the end of June of this current year compared to last year. Number of visitors based on transactions had gone up also. The interesting thing, the transactions had increased in other than the county lot. The transactions in the county lot are actually down. So it's really transactions taken in other locations that the county has their kiosks, such as 4476 lot behind the Hooven building, Lehigh North and South, up behind the annex or the admin building where there was an increase. So if you're just joining me, this is Carbon Matters live streaming. I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. We're going over some of the issues or items in the news from Carbon County over about the last 45 to 60 days. Also, in the second half, once I get really through all these articles, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a little bit about my decision, what led up to the actual decision not to file my nomination papers to run for re-election. So please stand by for that. And I also want to highlight again, coming up on 28th September will be Carbon Matters live streaming, and that will be a special edition because during that time I'm going to be interviewing live Carbon County Controller candidate Sam Lux. He's going to spend about 31 minutes with me talking about the controller's duties and responsibilities, what he brings or will bring to the table as a controller. So I'm hoping that you can join me once again on 28 September, Carbon Matters live streaming, where I'll be interviewing controller candidate Sam Lux. So what's going on at Mock Chunk Lake Park? Actually quite a bit. I'll highlight one thing. I don't know if I saw in the news or not, but we did, led by our EMA director, Mark Nalesnik, and this did make the paper. I worked with our park director and our lifeguard supervisor, right, and really a senior lifeguard out there to set up really what was a command post exercise. I like to refer to it, right? So Mark took the lifeguards who were present through a series of events and sought their input of how they respond. And the scenario we were using was a potential drowning, right? So, how would the lifeguards first react when a parent came up stating that they couldn't find their child? What steps would they take then? Then it becomes, well, the child hasn't been located on the beach. What's the next step? Another individual might approach them in the next event and says, well, the last time I saw Johnny, he was out on the east swimming area with his little brother or something like that. And we ran through the whole scenario all the way to the recovery and bringing in first responders. But interesting about that, here in August coming up, we're going to actually have a full training exercise. I'd like to say it's a FTX, like a field training exercise, but a full training exercise where not only are we bringing in our lifeguards, our park rangers, our sheriff, JTPD, Jim Thorpe Fire Department, Lehighton River Rescue, St. Luke's. We're going to bring in the media, all of them to really run a full-blown exercise out there to ensure that the skills of our lifeguards are always honed to a fine edge. Mock Chunk Lake Park, things have been going quite well out there. I did want to mention, first and foremost, the 4th of July weekend, that we had things that were Carbon County residents, membership holders, pavilion renters, campers, Coaldale residents who have students or children in Panther Valley High School. Strong comments. All who were out there over that weekend really enjoyed the much smaller crowds over that weekend. You need to remember that. Remember my initial proposal in motion that Rocky and Wayne voted against was Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July weekend, and Labor Day weekend. I eventually, after about, 4 weeks, 4 times bringing this up, finally we compromised to do it 4th of July weekend. I'm still a firm believer that at least on the holidays themselves, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, it should be county residents having priority access, membership holders, campers, pavilion renters, Coaldale residents with children. That should be every holiday during the summer. You deserve it. You help pay and have been paying for Mock Chunk Lake Park, specifically the beach, since 1974, coming up on our 50th anniversary for the actual beach or recreational area. The dam or the watershed was actually finished in 72. It would be 2 years later, start filling it up, and recreational activities began. Finally, too, got the beach bus running every Saturday. Nescahoning, Jim Thorpe, Lansford, Summit Hill. You want to get to the beach? Go ahead to Carbon Transit's website. That beach bus is running every Saturday. Had an email from Lanta, who manages Carbon Transit for us, and they said that the ridership is sufficient, that they already are committed themselves to doing this next year. So I do hope that does come to fruition, and I would really like to see if they could incorporate Mock Chunk Lake Park into their routes during the week also. And I think that's where we need to get. For the summer, they should modify their routes, that they go through Summit Hill, Jim Thorpe, connect all their sub routes, their flex schedules, their fixed routes, and ensure that wherever Carbon Transit goes in Carbon County, it can link citizens eventually to Mock Chunk Lake Park. Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, this is Carbon Matters live streaming. Thank you so much for joining me. You remember we took out a $4 million loan from our capital funds. We really borrowed from our own fund, our capital projects fund. Well, we paid that back. I think it was around $30-some thousand. We ended up paying an interest. You got to remember, right? What Wayne wanted to do is tax all of us $250,000 in perpetuity, in lieu of taking a $34,000 or paying $34,000 in interest. He wanted to tack on to our bills $250,000. Now that would have brought in about $350,000. So $34,000 you're paying here, $350,000 of tax revenue we would have taken in. So that creates what, a delta or a different, you have excess of about what, $315,000. You know what county government would have done with that surplus money? They would have spent it on you. Don't let them tax you. They tax you, they're going to spend it. There's no such thing as a true surplus, right? County government finds a way to spend our money. So that was a good deal. Rocky and I really stood fast on that. Wayne didn't like it at all, but it benefited the residents of Carbon County. Oh, planning up some administration, building repairs. I think most people know we've had at least 3 water issues. One in the admin building, one down prior to that in 44 Susquehanna Street, and then we had one down in the newer building down in Lehighton on Cole Street. But again, the repairs and upkeep has begun in the administration building, and they're actually working from about 4 in the afternoon till like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, so not to disrupt the staff. In 44 Susquehanna, those repairs from the water damage haven't started, but if I recall correctly, I think we did recently approve that bid. Ooh, Carbon continued salary reviews. I would recommend looking at today's Carbon County Commissioners meeting because we did talk salaries today. Remember, there was maybe about a dozen job positions that we really wanted to ensure that after we implemented the salary study, that we wanted to take a closer look at and redo those job positions, get them updated, and reassess those salaries. Well, today we took another step forward. I believe it was indeed the GIS director. We had that job position rewritten, updated based upon actual duties and responsibilities versus those of 10, 15 years ago. And that's over a $2 increase, that position. So that falls in line with the promise that Rocky and I made, that we'd be ensuring that we would review those challenged positions like the election director, purchasing, and now GIS. And guess what? Each of those was reviewed, their job classifications, KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities updated, and resulted in a recommendation for increases, and those increases were approved. So the process is working. Oh, women's shelter moving forward. Oh, March of 2019, when this became, I'm going to say, a political issue. Had a political candidate who was head of the homelessness task force, and they were going to take the Yvonne incident and they were going to make a single woman, homeless woman shelter a reality in Carbon County. Well, that fizzled out as quickly as the election results in November, unfortunately. Since that time, I've been committed to bring that to realization, was able to find the funds, repurpose funds that Family Promise was not using for that. They couldn't bring it to realization due to some staffing issues, director changeover, and internal problems. We were able to redirect more than $150,000. The work for the single homeless women's shelter is out for bid. I believe we probably have another week or two, and those bids will be due. The completion date, based upon the contractual requirement, will be 29 September. So I'm extremely excited to work with a local nonprofit and getting close to, maybe we're in the red zone now, I'm going to say, right? We're about within the 20-yard line. And I hope that indeed there won't be any supply chain issues. And by the end of September, we can get the work done and get the permitting and everything, and finally have that much needed single homeless women's shelter in Carbon County. All right, there's one. What's that? Lehighton shop owners seek help. Yeah, this is a continuing problem, right? There's the concern that the diverting of traffic, right, not allowing a left turn lane out of the county lot, is impacting the businesses on First Street in Lehighton. And I don't think there's a doubt that it impacts it to some point, but we still haven't done the true analysis to determine how many fewer cars are or are not going through Lehighton due to Jim Thorpe Police Department's not permitting a left turn out of the lot due to safety issues and concerns. And we just had another recent discussion about that. Something does need to be done in regards to that, because again, we want to see all our communities thrive because of tourism, not just select communities. All right. So if you're just joining me, I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. I'm just starting into my second half. I think I have about 10 minutes or so more of kind of news items pulling them from the Times News and Standard Speaker, some online stuff talking about those issues. And then, like I said, I'm going to talk, in the second half, I'm going to go ahead and discuss, what was the impetus or the motivation for my inaction in regards to not filing my nomination papers to run in the November election. Oh, we did open the bids last week for the courthouse renovations. I think we have about $5 million in capital funds left. It's going to be close. We have 2 more weeks of review before those bidders will be chosen. We are reviewing them. We have Boyle Construction, who's our consultant, also going through them, making sure they're technically feasible and are at the lowest cost possible. I do have an issue with it. There's about a little under $500,000 that is being unnecessarily utilized to relocate the clerk of courts from upstairs, the second floor, down to the former adult probation, and then the district attorney was going to occupy the clerk of courts. No need for that movement. It's a waste of about $500,000. Additionally, bear in mind, if the county would have pursued and finished the purchase of 410 Center Avenue, we had the opportunity to do this work in one fell swoop, temporarily relocate for 10 to 12 months the courts and those particular row offices that are essential to the operations of court, put them up at 410 Center Avenue, and we would have had that project done in 10 to 12 months instead of 18 months. Well, you know what 18 months is costing you compared to 12 months? Millions of dollars, right? The consulting firm alone, for every additional month of construction, we're paying in the mid-30s for our consultant. So that alone is right around $200,000 to $250,000 just for one consultant. So we're not talking about the general contractor, the electrical, the plumber, the prime, all right? So again, the short-sightedness by my colleagues of not purchasing 410 Center Avenue, that's the old school district office. And you say, Chris, well, it wasn't practical. Yes, it was practical. The plan was done. Remember, the original plan was to put children and youth up there, bring back aging, and then workforce development. Yet, we would have thousands upon thousands of additional square footage for future expansion, to include the potential move of the magistrate in Jim Thorpe into that building. Because the magistrate in Jim Thorpe, in property owned by the Dillies, is too small to serve their needs. And let's say we just kept it to use it for flex space. We could have had it, held it for 2 years, and then sold it, right? 410,000, was it about $400,000 if I recall that one, right? We could have kept it for 2 years, would have saved well over $1 million now, right? And then we could have went and sold it if we didn't want to go forth and renovate it. Now we know the initial renovation came in because of the salaries that have to be paid when you go out to bid, right? Anywhere from $7 to $9 million. But we were presented by a local builder who works regularly with our hospital networks here, who is prepared to do a lease to own, custom build it to our needs, lease it back to us, lease to own, right? Would have been about $5 million, almost half, short-sighted not purchasing. Now we're down there in Lehighton in a building that we're having issues with already. All right. Wow. Hey, I wanted to talk. I'm going to save this one. Jim Thorpe touted as model for PA tourism. Hey, bear in mind the Animal Shelter Advisory Commission meets regularly the first Tuesday of each month. It met this week, really good hour-and-a-half meeting, very constructive. Since the animal shelter operations and risk assessment was done that I launched with the help of Lehigh Valley Humane Society and our Pennsylvania risk pool, county's risk pool, our liability insurance. A lot of progress has been made. Remember, that study or that assessment of the shelter was the impetus for standing up of this advisory commission and all the positive changes that has taken place in the animal shelter. So kudos to that study, kudos for that commission for taking recommendations from that study, implementing them, and then looking beyond that study to make that shelter better for the animals, for those who work there, and for those who visit. All right. Oh, I did miss a Mock Chunk Lake Park one. Mock Chunk Lake Park, that storm that came through had some notable damage out there. Some big trees come down. Penn State Extension Office, we're still waiting for a PP&L inspection because had some damage out there electrical wise that needed to be taken care of. But again, Mock Chunk Lake Park in its entirety is open. The trails, the biking, the boat rental, the fishing, all that is back open. The only thing is, Penn State Extension Office, those folks are still working remote until we can get PP&L back out there and do an inspection. All right, let's see. Salary appeals, we talked about that. Dry weather, one-stop rafting. Ooh, courts issue. Yeah, the courts was a year and a half or so ago. They asked the commissioners to sign a contract for bringing a Tyler system to tie in offices of the courts, Prothonotary, Register of Wills. That has gone live, that new system. There continues to be some challenges with it, but all appearances are and all reports are they continue to work through the small inconveniences that are taking place. I know some of the title searchers were having some issues, so I suspect in about 6 to 12 months, the issues that you're hearing about, reading about today will be gone, and in a year from now, you know, what we'll see is going to this new system will end up being a godsend, in that it's helping make county government more effective, efficient, and responsive, and specific to the courts. Okay, we had some big money from the opioid settlement. We took $200,000 of that, working with Carbon Monroe Pike. Yeah, Megan, that is Tyler Technologies. We did have some challenges with that, but again, I think part of it was communications between the two parties. The individual who originally set that up for the courts, the administrator left, so there was maybe a lack of continuity that could have created some issues also. But again, we're going to get that completely on track. All right, so took $200,000. Going to work with Carbon Monroe Pike and hopefully Wayne County to address the issues resulting from the opioid problem. These funds are coming from one of the settlements that were made. So I think that's going to be a big campaign that's going to kick off. And we're continuing to develop a plan, an action plan of how to utilize those funds to make a difference on the impact that opioids have had in our community. Taking the step to, Carbon takes steps to fight blight. I'm going to mention two things here in regards to blight. So we did enact or took advantage of a law that was passed that allows the recorder of deeds to charge $15 on any deed filed in that office. So starting 1 January, there will be a $15 recording fee added on at the recorder of deeds when they're filing. That'll be used and put into a demolition fund to help fight blight. I've been working with David Bodnar, the planning director, and the whole home repair program. Carbon County is just over $1 million, and we're creating some sub plans to that. And the big initiative that I had been working on with David on, which was really critical, was what we're calling the double home whole home repair program. And it's really a pilot. Those of us who live in the area are very familiar with 204, 206 Center Avenue and the terrible blight that is up there. Miss Judy and I have been working now, I think it's been, a year and a half, trying to get the blight funds that Jim Thorpe has to take care of that issue. They wanted Judy, who lives on the other side, her family on the other side of the double, to pay half of the rehabilitation fees once they rip down the other half. Obviously, Miss Judy, and for her veteran husband, Agent Orange sufferer, couldn't afford that. So David and I created this double home program where we're offering what the borough wanted the homeowner to provide, that $50,000. I think they wanted 54, Jim Thorpe. But we're legally able to provide up to $50,000, so when that one half of the double is ripped down, we can reconstruct a wall and a foundation for the remaining half of the double homes. And if you're from this area, double homes are everywhere. And when you have one that isn't taken care of, that's a big problem, right? And that's what we have at that terrible, terrible blight shame there at 204 Center Avenue that is impacting the family living in 206. All right. Let's get ready to jump into some election stuff there. There goes my Cafe Ruiz coffee. The official coffee of C4, Carbon County Commissioner, Cafe Ruiz or Ruiz coffee. I prefer the light roast. Always prefer the light roast. All right, let's stay there. Mr. Sunrise, light roast cup. I'm looking at Maggie. She's over there at the kitchen table, I don't know, doing something, working on some art stuff. So I looked over at her because she was looking at me. Isn't it much better when she's sitting beside me? That's what I much prefer, but was it a year or so ago when Maggie decided she went on strike with the Screen Actors Guild and all that or something? I do miss her because she's great at keeping track of the comments and stuff like that and bringing people into the conversation where I just talk, right? I forget to look at the iPad to see if there's any comments, things of that nature. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and jump into this election stuff after one simple reminder. I'm going to do this once or twice more. Make sure you join me on Carbon Matters live streaming as I host with my special guest, Sam Lutz. He's a candidate for county controller. He does have an opponent. It's the only competitive race, I would argue, that's going to take place at the county level in November. So it'll be great to hear Sam, listen to him, explain to us the duties and responsibilities as he sees them of the controller, what he will bring to the table when elected to the position of controller. I've had the pleasure to speak with Sam on a couple occasions, extremely impressed with his background and experience. But again, we're going to go ahead and bring him here. I'm hoping to have a lot of interaction from our audience also. If you have any questions, or you can always call in to 570-503-6780 that night also and ask questions to Sam about what he brings to the table or will bring to the table as a controller here in Carbon County once elected to that office. All right, so what I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start talking a little bit about what led up. What do we have, 13 minutes left? Okay, we're right on schedule. So I want to thank so much those who've been here from about 2000. I had that little issue at the beginning where I had some music in the background. Some of my fun music was in the background. and Facebook came on and said, no, 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 you should be paying royalties or something, I guess. So they shut me down, so I had to come back up without the music. And like I said, I've used that numerous times before. And I do have other royalty-free music, music that I've bought and purchased, so I'll use that in the future. All right. So I had made the conscious decision a couple of years ago, shortly after being elected, that if I were to ever run again for county commissioner, I would run as an independent. And so I did change my party just prior to this petition period, which was in February, March timeframe of this year. So I changed to independent. It was my complete intent to go ahead and run as an independent candidate. I mean, think about in my first election that I won. You know, the Republicans were saying I was a Democrat. The Democrats were calling me a Republican. You know, no doubt I was a Reagan Republican, from 1983 was it, if I recall, when I first registered as a Republican. So I've been a Republican up until that point, almost 40 years. I was more Republican, I'll tell you what. My values, my fiscal conservatism is much more aligned with the Republican parties than most people in the Republican Party, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I wanted to be judged, should I run again, not based on a D or an R by my name, but rather by the value that I brought, having results from the priorities that I established at the beginning of my term and then annually update it, right? Measure me, vote for me based upon the value that I bring, not simply because I'm a D or an R, all right? And I'm gonna tell you, I truly believe if I would have stayed registered as a Republican, I was a shoo-in, right? Just because of the imbalance of registered Republicans to Democrats. But that's not what I wanted. I didn't want the shoe-in. I wanted to get a measurement of my worth, and I knew that was going to take a lot of work because people are hesitant to vote for an independent. But nonetheless, you know, I'm stubborn. I'm going forward. If I'm going to give 110%, and we'll see what happens. Well, since May, after the primary, we have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans running for commissioner. I had already been running my nomination papers, because as soon as the nomination petitions period finished in March, I believe it was March 7th, on March 8th, as an independent or third party, I was able to start collecting my required 219 signatures versus 100. So immediately on that day, I got the papers and I actually started circulating them and ended up with, you know, easy peasy 300 signatures, right, of residents who wanted me, encouraged me to run for office and to run as an independent. So that was wonderful. I truly enjoyed that. You know, be it down at the Jim Thorpe Market, down on the streets in Palmerton, up in Weatherly, all over the place. I'll tell you what, the signatures weren't so much the fun part. It was just talking to people to see how things were going. That's what I love about the petition requirement in Pennsylvania. It forces you, quote unquote, to get out and interact with people. So I did have, as a matter of fact, this is my complete packet. And look at this, it even includes the check I had getting ready to write here on the 1st of August. Plus, there's 3 parts to a packet, right, for a candidate. The affidavit of the candidate, financial disclosure form, and your nomination papers if you're running as a third-party independent. And of course, your check to pay the filing fee. Meg, I had invested in new signage, and I'm going to post a video later you're going to see with some of the new signage. Man, trinkets, coffee mugs, stuff like that. I get all that stuff, right? Victory in 2023, which is a play on Victory in 2019 that I used. Kind of changed my motto from if it matters to you, it matters to me, to if it matters to you, it still matters to me, right? So kind of updating that a little bit. So invested a lot of time, money, and effort getting ready for filing of my nomination papers on the 1st of August. And I think importantly, in the one video I'm going to put up, maybe even as early as tonight, last Friday night, I think up until about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I was out in the yard doing my full dress rehearsal, or getting our pop-up, our 10 by 10 ready for the Carbon County Fair. Maggie came out, gave me some expert advice because we wanted to make sure the rope lighting and the lanterns we had up in the ceiling, all that stuff was working well. It looked good. So we did about a 90% mock-up. The only thing we didn't mock up that is set up was one of the walls in the pop-up. And that's just so we could move around and see and look. And then I spent all day Saturday making adjustments, modifications, working a couple new things that we brought in, a couple faux tree trunks that Maggie had created for another project that I was going to kind of repurpose for this. So no doubt, you know, just Saturday, man, I was full on. Sunday, I broke all that stuff down, put it away, had the trailer completely loaded for heading to the fair this Saturday to set up for 7 to 12. Matter of fact, I wasn't going to the CCAP conference in Erie because I wanted to be interacting with people at the Carbon County Fair, especially after just, you know, expected to announce. Let me take a drink here. So, nonetheless, good setup. It looked really good. I was excited about it. It's funny, I shouldn't say this, I don't like interacting with people. I tend to be an introvert, but once I get out and start talking to people, it pretty much can't stop me, right? Once I get going. But I tell you what, normally I'm very reserved, I hold back, and then boom, you throw me in that environment, I adapt, I make it happen. So let's talk on the 1st of August, went to work. It was good. I went down to the election office to see Jen about 10 o'clock. I talked to Jen. Jill was out. I think she may have been sick that day. So I talked to Jane and Jen, both of them together, just kind of BS and see how things were going in the elections office. And then I went separately. I had my entire packet, right? All 3 documents plus the check. And I took Jen aside and said, Jen, all I want you to do is review my packet to ensure there are no discrepancies so that should I decide to file on this day, Monday or on Tuesday, 1 August, all my paperwork is correct. So just in case I had to run in there for some crazy reason at 4:29 in the afternoon right before closing, you know, I had to do is hand it to him, and we knew it was good. Jen reviewed it. She said, Chris, everything looks good. Boom. I said, okay. Then I left. Came home for lunch and had a conversation with Maggie. It was a good conversation, but again, it was just one of those days, you know, a couple things going on. They always do. And I started, after that conversation, lunch was, I can't even remember what we ate or anything. It's kind of a blur. But went back to the office like about 1 o'clock, because normally I'll do 12 to 1. I'll be able to get home for lunch. Went back to the office, it was 1 o'clock, and I had been thinking on the way over there, but I knew I had 3.5 hours before I'd be filing. Because if I was gonna file, I wasn't gonna file till late in the day anyhow. Kind of keep the suspense up, you know, because of the opposition, right? Keep them wondering. We did have one meeting that afternoon. It was probably 1:30 to 2:30. So I knew there was going to be a period of time where I wouldn't be able to think. But I started thinking about a couple things. And first and foremost, you know, I started thinking about the 3 C's: country, county, and Chris. And what occurred to me is, literally, I'll go back as far as 1980, right? So almost 43 years, I've had three priorities in my life: my country, my county, and Chris, myself. Honestly, as selfish as that may sound, that is the reality. It's not to say my family, once I got married, and my children weren't a priority, but my top three priorities, and not surprisingly, I guess, those priorities were fully supported once I got married, once I had children. I'd like to think they willingly supported those three priorities, but nonetheless, Maggie and the kids supported my service to my country as number one, my service to my county, right? So you had 34 years in the military, then had a few years working at contract work for Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of State. Again, that's all about the country, right? And then, the campaign, making the decision to run for election, and then 3.5 years. So you're talking literally, 38 years or so of married life where those were my priorities: country, county, and Chris. And that was selfish of me. And I recognize that, and I fully admit to that. And I thought about, what does it mean another 4 years? Because trust me, I had a path to victory as an independent. I had a number, I was looking at between 5,200 and 5,800 votes. And guess what? I had no doubt I could get them. I analyzed the data, I was talking to people, I had a plan of action. I would have pulled it off as an independent in Carbon County. No doubt in my mind. But again, I'm always confident. But I'm confident because of the work I do to prepare for any action I take. So that was my first thought. So I'm right now I'm starting to weigh a decision I has already made. But I'm decisive, but I always do my research also, right? I'm not going to sit there and just emotionally do something. I'm still going to do at least mental analysis. So then I started thinking about, well, why did I run in the first place for commissioner? Well, it was because of a sense of a debt, right? How much value I placed upon being raised here in Jim Thorpe and having opportunities throughout the county as a young boy, a young man, right, that helped develop my work ethics, my beliefs, my values. And those were foundational to my successes, right? So you take those values, that work ethic, add that to a great support team that's called Maggie, Molly, and Taylor, right? That's kind of a winning combination. With you add that to a passionately assertive individual, right? That's a strong. But that was a debt I had to this community. And I said, well, how am I going to repay that debt? And ultimately, I made the decision to run for office. But I had always said that once that debt was paid, I wouldn't continue to pay into that, right? It's just like the analogy of a mortgage, right? You pay a mortgage monthly. 30 years has transpired. That's that last check you have to write to the bank. You don't keep paying, right? So I was considering that and recognizing that, what, I think I've reached that point, or I'm right on the cusp of paying this off. So I won't be running a second time to pay off that debt, because the end of this term, my debt will have been paid in full. And that actually changes how I approach an issue and challenge also, right? Debts aren't always fun being paid off, right? They're not necessarily enjoyable having to write that check every month. So, even your mentality changes when you're no longer doing something out of a sense of debt, right? It changes the individual. And again, number one was I recognized I was being selfish. I didn't want to be selfish any longer. Number two, I recognized that, the reason for running it, paying off that debt, that has been fulfilled. I'm good. right? Then the third one. I did 2 tours in the Pentagon. We lived in Northern Virginia for 6 years. I was on the Army staff for 1 year. Fortunately, that was the only year in the military where it was so challenging to make a difference. It's just because of what was going on in Iraq. I was working in Latin America. But nonetheless, second tour in the Pentagon, wonderful. 4 years on the Joint Staff, working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I've always now assessed every job based upon a certain psychological feeling that I had at that job, emotional feeling, and actually a physical reaction that I had to that job. And every job since and every job prior, I would assess using the similar criteria. And it was about how I felt. And what I would do ride share called slugging into the Pentagon. So I'd jump in a car with others. I'd get dropped off at Pentagon south side of the Pentagon, where the sluggers could be dropped off, ride share people. But as soon as I pulled in that parking lot and that door was opening, and right now I'm getting the goosebumps from it, right? I'd get goosebumps, my adrenaline would start rushing, my heart would start beating faster, and I would be walking significantly faster than I walk. I would be at the Pentagon corridor walk, because we were always rushing between meetings. But when I got out of that car, I was already doing that pace, rushing through the E-ring type of pace, going up the OSD. And then at the end of the day, I had to be at the bus stop at 5:50 p.m. to catch the 16P Express back home. I would wait till the very last minute, 5:45, 5:46, 5:47, before I'd throw that backpack on my back, run out of 2 Echo 773, run down the E-ring corridor past the chairman's office, which literally was probably 150, 200 feet from us on the left as we ran by. I'd hear my coins jingling in my backpack, and I would be literally running down the corridor to catch that bus. I can't tell you how many times I literally do that. But what that was expressing or demonstrating to me of how much I loved that job, making a difference, that one, as soon as I got onto the reservation, I wanted to get in that office to start the day. And knowing that I had stuff to do, I was going to be there as long as I possibly could to get it done. Not one day since January 6, 2020, when I took the oath of office, did I ever have that feeling about going into work in county government. It's not saying I didn't enjoy days. It doesn't mean I didn't complete a multitude of priorities. But I never had that feeling where I can't wait to get in there. I'm going to push the limits of going home. Nope, my day was over. I was ready to go. And now I'd come home and do hours of things at night, work in county business and stuff like that. But again, I never had that adrenaline rush, that heart thumping, that quick pace walk beyond my normal pace. So there was enough. So now you're starting to see, wow, there's 3 things that are swaying him. I also thought about my love and passion isn't municipal government. I love not national politics. I love national issues, right? I'm sure that stems from my time in the Pentagon. People say, oh, you should run for state senator or House of Representatives. That's not me. I don't enjoy that, right? I like national level stuff. So I was thinking about that also, saying, at this time, do I want to do another 4 years of local government when my passion isn't that? My passion is the people of Carbon County, but it's not policy and legislation at that level, right? It's at the federal level. So again, another reason why it's kind of making me think that I really have to consider if I'm going to drop that paperwork. And I think why that came up, the federal legislation policy, is because My most enjoyable days or times as a county commissioner, obviously helping people, making a difference. But I would tell you, working with the National Association of Counties as the chair of their Veterans and Military Services Committee. Why? Because it's working advocacy on federal policy and legislation to help veterans, the military services, and their families. Again, now that all trickles down to the state and to the county, but man, those were my happiest days, happiest moments, working those issues, seeing the PACT Act pass, seeing progress on the CVSO Act, interacting with the hidden heroes from the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and trying to find advocacy for the Elizabeth Dole Act that's under consideration. Right? And then lastly, I thought about, well, are there any things that are kind of at the tipping point that if I don't stay another day in January as part of a second term, I won't complete, or I'll be unhappy that I couldn't get across the finish line, or to the point that no return, meaning they're going to get done. Maybe not by me, but they're going to get done. And there were two items I looked at, and they're both from my 2023 priorities. One, I wanted to see that single homeless women's shelter completed, and guess what? I think we're going to get there. I'm comfortable knowing where we're at, that we're going to get across the finish line. And then the second one is, unless the borough of Jim Thorpe screws this up, we're going to get 206 Center Avenue rehabilitated. Might not necessarily totally get done this year, but everything is in place, that double home repair program, to get her done and ensure Judy and her home and her children, her son who lives in that home with their family, will have a rehabilitated home to live in. Again, if the borough of Jim Thorpe doesn't screw this up. All right? Because I've done everything I can to bring it to a point where there's no reason why we should fail in either of those two initiatives. So with that, I'm comfortable saying, you know what? I don't have to do another day beyond that which will take me to the point of paying off that debt. Because I said, when that debt is paid, it doesn't matter if it's 1 day, 4 years, 4 years and 3 months. I'm done. I'm turning it over. So just as easily, I could have been reelected, took the oath in January, and 2 weeks later, I'd be saying, my debt is paid. I'm turning this over to the next generation. And that's really what would have occurred. There would have been a time between 1 day and 4 years in the second term where I just turned it off and turned it over to the next generation. So that took me to the point at 4:25 in the afternoon. And number one driving it, though, I'm going to tell you, is the selfishness, right? The country, the county, and Chris being selfish and not focusing on my family. That took me to that point about 4:25 in the afternoon to do that live stream broadcast and simply say, and I'm sure surprise to many people who encouraged me and supported me, that I would not file those nomination papers. So there it is in a really big nutshell. I never do anything in a small nutshell, right? That's my little nutshell. And that's not the one over the world. That's not the clear, concise, complete Chris Lukasevich. But that brought me to that decision. I'll tell you, I am, feeling somewhat uncomfortable for Carbon County government, me not being there. I really am. I think the fact that Wayne is going to run again and is pretty assured a seat, I think that is horrible for Carbon County. It was horrible 4 years ago. It's even worse now. And again, you got to make some tough decisions. And guess what? I think he's a shoe-in again. And I think that's sad. He's had one focus for at least the last 8 years, right? And that's been the EOTC. Good project, extremely helpful. I always said we should have the best trained, educated prepared volunteers, but that's been his sole focus. Talk to him and ask him, what other initiatives did he come up with that he brought to realization that's making a difference in the quality of life for every Carbon County citizen? There's not one. There is not one initiative that he brought forth that's making a difference in your life, right? Other than the EOTC. And it's an important one, but I don't like one-trick ponies. And that's what that man is, you know? So I am concerned that he will be reelected, and I think it's a negative for Carbon County. You know, I'm always going to speak my mind, right? I don't hold back at all. Have no reason to. So I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. You got to join me on 28 September. That controller position is critical, and I had invited both candidates and all candidates running for office to sit with me, all new candidates. Sam Lux accepted that, so he's going to join me on 28 September. I'm going to ask you to join me. We're going to have a conversation with Sam. I'm going to use about 15 minutes only 15 minutes, I promise, to talk about issues, events, newspaper headlines, and we're going to deep dive with Sam and understand why the controller's office is so important and why he believes he's the right person to represent the elected, represent the voters of Carbon County in that position. So I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for staying tuned. I know it's tough to listen to me for an hour and 10 minutes, but I love the fact that you're willing to do that. Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, have about 150 more days, and I'm not going to run to the finish line, but rather run through the finish line, because that's the way I roll. Take care. Have a great night. Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, signing off.